John swung his sword against the training dummy. Around him, boys were practicing their moves and showing off their skills, but John was simply building his endurance, using the heavier sword against the dummy like Jamie told him. His father had always said the reason he didn't appear in tourneys was so an opponent wouldn't know what to expect. John took that advice to the heart, but since he would be fighting instead, he underplayed his skills and didn't show off like the other boys were doing. He looked around the field at his potential competition. There were some that stuck out immediately. The young Tyrell boy he'd met the day before. Loris seemed quite skilled, although John thought him a little extravagant in his moves. Lancel, while being an idiot, looked much better than he had expected. There was the two Royce boys, Robar and Waymar, both skilled, though the older one also had size on his side. John finished up and walked past the Stormland squires. None really stuck out, though there was no shortage of bravado coming from them. The Westerland squires were just as loud, though some of these did at least have the talent to back it up. The Riverlanders didn't interest him. Sure, they would provide competition. But John preferred to keep away from them. Suffering their liege's daughter was enough. Ah, snow, care for a spa. I'm afraid I must decline, Lord Loras. I have somewhere I need to be. Perhaps we'll be drawn together then. Well then, I'll wish you good fortune now, shall I? John cheekily replied. Ah, that's the spirit. You too, John. Best of luck. Perhaps we'll stay apart until facing each other in the final. Loras laughed and turned to practice with his brother. John had to smile. Never bet against the confident man was something he heard people say, but being too confident was as much a problem as not being confident enough. He walked over and placed his sword back among the others and made his way to where his guards were waiting. It was strange for John to find himself accompanied by guards, but it was something Jaime insisted on when he was outside the castle. John didn't mind, though. His guards, Alirs and Jaws were hills, bastards just like him, and they built up an instant camaraderie. Finished for the day, John? The tall Alirs asked. His physique was impressive, but it was the shorter Jaws who John thought the more skilled of the two. He'd watched them spar, and while Alirs was no slouch, Jaws was much better. Aye, Alirs. You two eaten yet? No, John. It's fine, though we're not hungry. Jaws replied. Well, I am, and it's my treat. Come on. I'm sure an ale and some food would go down well. The two men smiled, and all three of them made their way to the small tavern John preferred. The food was always delicious, and the patrons had gotten used to John and had stopped making a fuss over Lord Jaime's squire. Jaime sat at his desk, waiting for Tyrion and Gerion to arrive. Jon Arryn had asked for a meeting, and he knew it was about funding the crown, something he no longer wished to do. His father had used their money to increase his influence at court, something to hold over the head of the stag, and the fat king had taken the money like a pig takes swill. His sister wasn't much better. The woman had never been refused anything by her father, and she took the same approach now, luxury items imported at great cost, and damn the expense. Brother, Tyrion said as he entered Gerion following behind. Tyrion, uncle, sit down. There is much we must discuss. I intend to cut our contribution to the crown, he said, noticing the shock on both their faces. They already owe us nearly 1,000,000 gold dragons. Father was funding the crown at the rate of almost 250,000 a year, not to mention the nearly 100,000,000,000,000,000. Caver, this needs to stop. I agree, brother, but it'll cause problems both with our sister and the crown. Damn our sister and damn the crown. I'm Lord of the Westerlands, not King's Landing. We need to spend our money on projects here. The gold won't last forever. We must do something now before it's too late. You do realize who'll fill the gap, brother. Let the Tyrells waste their coin on the fat kings. Whimsies, they won't do it for long. And when they realize that it's a Stark he wants as his son's bride, they'll cut their funding pretty fast. His uncle said, a large smile on his face. So, brother, what projects did you have in mind? Castamere. Jaime said, shocking them both. The minds were flooded, but Jon had found a solution thanks to Tyrion's encouragement to read. But how? Jon found it in one of those books you pointed him to. He called it a wind wheel. I'm not sure of the exact details, but Maester Craylan assured me it could work. He has the drawings in his rooms if you want to take a look. Tyrion sat there dumbfounded. If they could remove the water from Castamere, their minds would almost double overnight. This was huge. To think a 7-name-day-old boy had possibly found the solution that his father could not. He laughed so loudly the others must have thought he had gone crazy. "Are you okay, Tyrion?" his brother asked. "Well, yes, I'm fine. I was just thinking how father would have reacted to Jon. Speaking of Jon, I want you to attend a meeting with him later." "Oh, and who are we meeting?" "Sir Wireless Manderley, I want you to set up a trading agreement with the North. Well, with the Manderleys at least. Nothing huge, just a foot in the door. And you want me to bring Jon because he's his liege lord's son. He also knows more about the North than either of us, so he may see some opportunity we don't." "Of course, brother. I'll have it set for after the archery." "Good. We'd better make our way to Lannisport. Jon's already there. Are you bringing Joy, Uncle?" "Aye. Jon wants to show her around the horse." Daemon Lannister was not feeling well. His drunken encounter had created a whole set of problems. Problems that could end with him losing his head. The fact that he'd slept with his cousin was bad enough, but that she was the queen was downright treasonous. What made it worse was that it had happened another 2 times since. Daemon never considered himself a weak man. Sure, he was cocky and arrogant like most youths, but he thought he was strong. But just thinking of his cousin's naked body and the noises she made as they fucked was enough to make him hard and undo his resolve to never do it again. "Are you okay, brother?" his sister, Serena, asked. "I'm fine, sis, just thinking about the tourney. You competing in the joust and melee or just one of them?" "No, I would be in both. The prizes are way too good not to." His sister nodded along. 50,000 gold dragons to the winner of the joust, 25,000 to the runner-up, 25.000 to the winner of the melee, and 10.00 to the runner-up, along with 10.00 for the archery. And then there was that Squires tournament that had everyone excited, young boys competing with a 1.00 gold dragon prize. It was unheard of. What do you think about the Squires competition? I thought it odd at first, sis, but then I heard how Jaime explained it to the king. These boys are the future. I'd have killed for the opportunity back when I was squiring, so I get it, and I'm looking forward to see it. Any favourites? Sir Adam's Squire and Sir Lyle's are both impressive young men. The young Tyrell is talented, and the elder Royce is a dark horse. What about Lord Jaime's page? Jon Snow? Yeah, surely if he's trained by Lord Jaime, he'd be among the favourites. He looked at his sister and shook his head. He'd watched the young man train, and he showed very little talent, just swung away with what little strength he had. It had surprised him as he, like his sister, had expected more. No, sis, he would be lucky to make it past the first round. Jon walked with joy towards the large stabling area, the little girl mumbling excitedly about horses all the way, forcing Jon to walk with a contented smile on his face. His 2 guards behind him just shook their heads as he swung her hand as they walked, making the girl giggle. Gerion and Tyrion had found him not long after he'd eaten, and he was delighted to see Joy with them. He'd promised her he'd take her to see the horses, and the hug she'd given him had brought a tear to his eye. "Horses, Jon?" She pointed at the stables. "Yes, Joy, come, let's go see them." "Yay, horses I come," she squealed. The 2 guards just followed on, trying not to laugh, as they reached the stables themselves. Jon had to hold her hand even tighter as the excitement got to her. He lifted her up, worried that if he didn't, she'd run off and get hurt. "Want to pet the horsey, Joy?" She nodded excitedly as he moved towards the small pony he'd picked out for her to pet. He held her tightly as her little hand brushed the horse's back and moved her closer to the horse's head. Nodding to Elias, he signaled to the bag he'd given the man earlier and watched as he took a small apple out of it and handed it to him. "Here, Joy, let's feed the horsey. Here, horsey, din-din time." She laughed as the horse took the offered apple from Jon's hand. "My turn, Jon. My feed, horsey." He looked to Elias as the man took another small apple from the bag and handed it to him. Carefully, he placed it in Joy's small hand and held her hand in his as he brought it to the horse's mouth as the horse took the apple. The girl gave an excited squeal, making Jon and the guards all laugh before Jon heard a girlish giggle from behind him. He turned to see Marjorie Tyrell looking on, her face lit up in a beaming smile as she watched Jon and Joy feed the pony. "Lady Marjorie, I'm sorry I didn't know you were here." "That's quite all right, Lord Snow. I was just passing." "No, not so, Jon," Joy exclaimed at the Rose of High Garden. "Oh, I'm sorry, little miss. Jon it is then," Marjorie said with a delightful giggle. "Jon," the little girl said definitively. "And who is this precious little angel?" Marjorie asked. "Lady Marjorie, allow me the pleasure to introduce Lady Joy." John decided to play at formality, noticing that Marjorie was grinning even more now. "Joy." "Ah, Jon, it seems you misspoke. It seems the lady's name is Joy." Marjorie laughed at the exchange.
"Ah, Joy it is, isn't it, little princess?"
The little girl just nodded and hugged him tighter, and Marjorie couldn't help but smile at the sight. The boy seemed so at ease with the little girl that it reminded her of how Garland and Willers used to be as she was growing up. Tyrion waited outside the large tavern where most of the Vale, Riverlanders and the few Northmen had made their base for drinking and eating at the tourney. John was late, which was unlike him, and he considered sending one of his guards to find the boy before he saw him and his 2 guards come jogging towards him. "Been busy, John?" "Sorry, Tyrion, petting horses takes a lot of time, especially when an excited young girl doesn't want to leave," John said, his voice breathless from the hurrying he'd done to get her. "No worries. My cousin enjoyed herself then, did she?" Tyrion smiled at the 2 guards who nodded enthusiastically. "Very much so." They made their way inside and took note of who was sitting with whom. The Vale lords sat together while the Riverlanders sat just behind them. The few northern lords, though, sat apart from them all in a small, tight group at the back of the tavern. Tyrion could see Sir Wireless's large frame as the man ate with great abandon. He may not have ever met the man, but Jon's description of his walrus-like father singled him out immediately. Beside him sat a gruff northerner, his balding scalp, a sharp contrast to his large black beard. His tunic was green and displayed a large black bear, a Mormont. Then he thanked the gods for Jon's insight. Nodding to Jon and pointing over to the table, they headed towards the northern men, Tyrion walking behind Jon and letting the boy take the lead in the introductions, figuring the northerners' dislike of the south would be tempered by one of their own. "Sir Wireless, Sir Jorah," Jon said to the 2 men. "My lord?" Wireless questioned, looking carefully at Jon before recognition broke out on his face. "Jon Snow?" "Aye, sir it is. Sit down, lad, move. Make room for young Snow and his friends." The large knight beamed at him before nudging his companions. "May I introduce Lord Tyrion, Sir Wireless?" "Well met, my lord. Please take a seat. A friend of young Snow is more than welcome at my table." Tyrion sat down, noticing the grim look the Bear Knight gave him. The others looked him up and down before turning away and continuing their meal. At the end of the table, a small man watched him intently, his dark green hooded robe covering the sigil on his chest. Tyrion looked back down at him and noticed the sigil more clearly. 3 black water lilies on a field of purple. He nudged Jon to show him where he was looking. Jon just nodded at him and took his seat beside him before calling a serving girl over and buying a round of drinks for the table, which resulted in an immediate thawing of the looks from the rest of the northerners and a deeper frown from the Bear Knight. Tyrion noticed that Sir Wireless looked on with a proud expression on his face, obviously approving of Jon's actions. "So, young Jon, how are you finding it here in the south?" Sir Wireless asked. "Warm, sir. Very warm," Jon replied, getting a large laugh from the big man and most of the others. "Aye, 'tis that all right. Doubt these southerners would do too well on a crisp northern morning." More laughs from the table ensued as the northerns started to talk among themselves. Tyrion decided to continue to let Jon take the lead. Far better to sit and watch, for now, he thought. "Your father is well, Sir Wireless." "Aye, Jon he is. He'll be pleased you asked." "Your father's a good man, sir." "That he is Jon, as is your own. I had thought he may join us." "Father doesn't like to leave the north unless it's vital." "True that. Not a man for tourneys is Lord Eddard. Well, the north is well represented with both myself and Sir Jorah competing in the lists and young Jagan in the archery." Sir Wireless adeptly changed the subject, noticing Jon's face when his father's absence was brought up. "Sir Jorah, your family's well, I hope?" "Aye, that they are Snow," the man grumpily replied. "So, they treating you well up here, Jon?" Wireless interjected, looking suspiciously at Tyrion and the guards. "Very well, sir. I've been more than fairly treated," Jon said, his smile answering more clearly than his words. The conversation flowed as much as the ale, the atmosphere between the northerners and Tyrion and the guards quickly disappearing. Even the Bear Knight seemed to lighten up, although the small man Tyrion noticed earlier still seemed to be watching intently. Tyrion caught him from the corner of his eye, wondering why he was so suspicious of him before he noticed it wasn't him he was looking at. It was Jon. Jon, the man at the end of the table. Why does he look so intently? Tyrion whispered as Jon looked at the man and smiled, receiving one back. He's a Crannogman, one of Lord Reed's bannermen. A fen, I think, given the sigil. My father always said Lord Reed was his lealest man, so perhaps he's just being extra vigilant. Tyrion nodded. And after buying another round of drinks for the men he and Jon got up to make their leave, he watched as Jon passed a note to Sir Wylis. The fat knight quickly took it and put it in his pocket. They bid the men farewell and left the tavern. The archery competition wasn't the most exciting thing Geryon had ever seen, something the king obviously agreed on given his drunken state. He looked to see Cersei staring daggers at Jaime and almost smiled. Some things don't change, he thought. Joy sat in his lap with Jon feeding her small pieces of mashed fruit, surprisingly without making a mess. He looked to see Jaime and Tyrion in conversation with Sir Adam and Lord Crakehall, all but Tyrion keeping their eye on the archery. He himself would have left by now. But he had gold on this, a lot of it, and hoped Jon's tip had been right. Put everything you can on Jagan Finn. Jon had told him so. He had almost 100 gold dragons, and he was almost beginning to doubt it, as the Mallister lad was very talented, as was the young man from the Stormlands. But Jon had told him that the Fells were the very best archers in all of Westeros, so he placed his bet. The first targets were simple enough. Pretty much everyone made it through, and the field only whittled out 2 from the 64 who started. The second one was only slightly harder. 20 paces wasn't that difficult. Even Geryon could hit the target from there, and he was a mediocre archer at best. It wasn't until they reached 60 paces that things picked up. We now move on to 60 paces, with 22 archers remaining, the herald announced to a few cheers. Joy, look at the arrows, he heard Jon say. Allows Jon. Yes, joy arrows. They go whoosh. Whoosh. His daughter exclaimed, forcing a laugh from him, and some of the people close to him. He noticed the young Tyrell girl sitting with her brothers. A few seats to their left was laughing and paying attention more to joy than the competition. 6 archers eliminated. We move to 70 paces. The herald's voice rang out. He paid more attention now. 16 left to go, and the fen was still there. He watched as the man hit the target dead center, the young Mallister squire doing the same, the Storm's landlad, a swan, he thought also matched the shot, but very few more did. 10 archers eliminated. The final 6 will move on to 90 paces. Geryon got excited now, as did most of the crowd. He looked to see almost everyone was paying attention to the competition now. Joy was finished eating, and Jon had taken her onto his own lap, bouncing the girl softly up and down to her delight. Jaime and Adam were intently watching as even Tyrion's apathy was replaced with interest. Had he bet to? Of course he had. Geryon laughed. The first man missed, as did the second. The third was the young Mallister squire, a Rivers who hit the target. The next man was a short, stocky man from the Reach, a squire for the High Towers. He thought he missed also before young Swan took his aim and hit the target, followed by the fen who hit it perfectly. Ladies and gentlemen, we're down to the final 3. The distance is 100 paces. The herald's voice shouted over the crowd. First up, Dennis Rivers, representing the Riverlands, and Lord Mallister. The young man stepped up and hit the target, but in the outer edge to a groan, followed by applause. Now, Balon Swan, representing the Stormlands and House Swan. He took his shot and finished closer, that the Riverlands lad, but still not close to the bull. Again the crowd applauded. Lastly, representing the North and House Fell, Jagan Fen. He watched as the Crannogman stepped to his spot, his breathing even and calm, unlike Geryon's own, which was quick and shallow. The young man pulled back the string and let loose. Geryon watched the arrow fly in almost fevered anticipation. Whoosh, his daughter said, making him turn and laugh at her. It's a bull. Dead center, we have our winner, my lords and ladies. I give you Jagan Fen, the winner of the Lannisport archery completion of 290 AK. The crowd cheered loudly, and Geryon's heart raced. He just looked at Jon, who sat there with an annoying, know-it-all grin on his face. He should never have thought him that he thought. He would have hugged the boy there and then, but Joy was hogging him all to herself. Instead, he looked to see Tyrion wearing the same grin, and wait, was Jaime doing so as well? Even Sir Adam and Lord Crakehall were grinning. Had everyone bet on the archery, he just laughed out loud. Cersei looked at her brother with fury in her eyes. He was sat there smiling and laughing with the men of the West. While she was alone beside her drunken husband, she searched the crowd and saw her uncle sitting with the bastard, the boy holding her uncle's bastard daughter and laughing along with the girl. It made her sick. She noticed Joffrey had a bored look on his face and looked at the bastard again. That was the difference she thought breeding. Her golden prince was how true-bred children behave, not like the two bastards down there. Finally, she saw Daven and her expression changed into something more friendly. She had been at her lowest when her idiot brother had rejected her. Had she not been? Then she would never have. Not with Daven anyway, but she was glad she did. He was firm and muscular and with the right training was a pretty good fuck. She squeezed her thighs together as she felt the arousal stir inside her. The king would be drunk later. She smiled. She would indulge herself fully tonight. Marjorie walked with Loras and Garland and their guards around the town. The archery had been much more exciting than she had thought it would, although truthfully she had spent most of her time watching Jon Snow. And Joy. The little girl was a treasure, and how attentive and careful Jon was with her made her heart soar. "Did you enjoy the archery, sis?" Garland asked. "Yes, Gar. It was more fun than I thought it would be, although the other events should be even more exciting. What say you, Loras?" "Loras is a little upset, sis. Seems he bet on the wrong man. Who was the small fellow anyway? How the hell did he win?" Loras grumpily said before kicking a small stone. "Someone said he was a Cranopman," she heard Garland say. Loras just shrugged grumpily, causing her to smile. They walked contentedly along, stopping at some of the stalls, not buying anything, just passing the time. The melee would be on the morrow, so tonight there was a small dinner for just her family. Her grandmother had wanted to dine with the king, but after seeing him at the contest, she had decided not to push it. The man was drunk far more than he was sober. Marjorie knew her grandmother and father wanted her to be queen. She wanted it too, but after seeing the bored, disdainful look that seemed to be forever entwined on Joffrey's face, the thoughts of him being her husband didn't fill her with any joy. Jaime made his way to the His Solar. The meeting with Lord Arryn was nigh, and he was ready for it. Tyrion and Geryon would be beside him. His uncle Kevin was entertaining the king, well making sure the man didn't fall down as drunk as he was, and he had sent Jon to ensure that the king would have someone to talk to. He found the man enjoyed having Ned's boy around, and while he preferred to keep him close to him, he felt it would be better if he had the meeting without him. When he arrived, he found Tyrion and Geryon already waiting. They entered the room and sat down. A serving girl came in and placed a tray with wine and some glasses on the table. He dismissed her, and Tyrion poured the wine, giving all of them a glass. "So, how well did you do?" his uncle asked. 300. Jaime made 400. And you? 1.00. His uncle replied, making them gasp. "You made 1,000 gold dragons on the archery. How much did you bet, uncle?" Tyrion's voice carried an air of unavailability in it. "I put 100 gold dragons on the man. Jon was certain he'd win, and he was right," his uncle proudly said. "You think he made any money himself?" Jaime asked. "Undoubtedly, although the boy doesn't spend anything on himself anyway," Geryon replied. Jaime just shook his head. He gave Jon an allowance, a generous one. They had argued about it before he told him that he represented the Lord of the West. It was to be expected. Jon had finally accepted it. Combined with the money his father sent and the fact that they paid for all his clothes and equipment, it left Jon with some nice pocket money. But try as they might, they couldn't get him to buy himself anything. Instead, he spent it on his guards, bought presents for Joy. He even got him Tyrion and Geryon presents. It had frustrated the hell out of him, except for it just reminded him he was his father's son. The knock on the door broke his train of thought. He bid them enter, and Lord Arryn walked in. The old lord looked well rested and not as tired as he had been when he arrived, and a part of Jaime felt guilty that what he would say may disrupt that peace. "My lord Hand, to what do I owe the pleasure?" he asked as the man sat down. "I wish to discuss the finances of the realm, my lord." Jon Arryn said before greeting both Tyrion and Geryon. "Of course, my lord, and how can I help you?" "Well, Lord Jaime, as you know, your father lent the crown a substantial amount of money. It seems though we may need to not only extend the time frame for paying it back, but are in need of another loan also." Lord Arryn's bluntness pleased Jaime. "Indeed, my lord, on the extension I see no problem with that. However, on the further loan there is some difficulty, I'm afraid." "Difficulty, my lord?" "Well, I'll be blunt, Lord Arryn, if I may. Of course, Lord Jamie. I am not my father, my lord, while he was content to waste our money. I am not when there are essential projects that need funding here in the West. Essential projects. Lord Jamie, what projects are those? Lannisport suffered great damage during the Ironborn attack. My lord, as did the Lannister fleet, both of these need to be seen to, which requires money. I cannot loan the crown and repair the fleet, and I needs must do what's best for my people. Of course, once we fulfilled those needs, we would be willing to accommodate when able, Tyrion said in a much more conciliatory tone after seeing the frown that Lord Arryn was wearing. Very well then, I understand, although you leave me in a difficult position, Lord Jamie. I'm afraid it can't be helped. Lord Arryn, as I said, I needs must fix my own problems first. Tyrion will accompany you and explain the terms regarding the outstanding debts. I'm sure you'll find them agreeable. Very well, Lord Jamie, Lord Geryon. Shall we then, Lord Tyrion? Of course, my lord, his brother said as the two men made their leave. Jamie waited until they were both out of the room. Nodding to Geryon, his uncle got up and made sure they were gone before closing the door. Jamie swallowed down the wine in his glass and filled it once more as his uncle sat down and took a drink from his own. Very well played, nephew. Very well played. Jon broke his fast early. He was excited for the day. The melee was something he looked forward to more so than the archery. Although he had made some coin for himself and his friends, his 2 guards had taken his advice and walked away with almost 6 moons' pay because of it, earning him wry smiles when he greeted them this morning. Last night had been odd for Jon. Jamie had a meeting with the Hand, along with Tyrion and Geryon, and Jon had assumed he'd be required, but instead he'd been asked to spend time with the king and his family. Both the Queen and the Prince had ignored him, and while the King was drunk and was as usual groping serving girls all night, he had taken the time to speak with Jon whenever he could. So, Snow, looking forward to the melee? The King had asked. Ah! Aye, your grace. Although truth be told, I'm eager for the squire's tourney to begin also. Ah, that's a good lad. Nothing gets the blood boiling more than fighting. I'll tell you, why the happiest times of my life were spent in battle fighting beside your father, my true brother. The King wistfully said before grabbing the serving girl and nuzzling her chest, forcing Jon to look away. Jon finished his meal and made his way to the front of the castle. He was eager to get to Lannisport earlier today. He knew Jamie would be leaving much later, and he wished to see some of the squires practice before he needed to do his duties. Geryon would be staying with Joy for most of the day, only leaving closer to the time of the melee, and Tyrion wasn't a morning person, so it gave Jon the opportunity for some free time. The ride to Lannisport was almost uneventful, but as they just about reached the town, he saw Aliers and Jaws stiffen on their horses, looking around to see what had got their attention. He watched as a group of horses rode past. The man at the front carried a large banner, 3 black dogs on a yellow field. Jon felt himself gulp as he finally saw the man himself, larger than any man he'd ever seen before, his black armor as dark as night. He looked up as the mountain that rides passed him by.